Carver.
Carver.
Last name.
His name is Carver. Oh, last name.
Maxwell.
Oh, geez, I'm Grobies, yes. Up on the airport road.
Yeah.
Yep. I know
Okay.
all of you guys.
Live, Senators.
Okay, we are live this morning and it is Tuesday morning. And this is the Senate Transportation Committee. And some of us are in Montpelier or some of us are home. So we have a mixed group this morning. And we'll get started. Our first item this morning is BAS authorizations. We have Anthea with us this morning and Cindy Locke and Costas Pappas from the agency. So tell us who wants to go first and tell us what this is about this morning.
So for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right.
I think the way your agenda is set up is I'm going to do just the little mini walkthrough of the language, and then you'll hear
Okay.
from the subject matter witnesses, and you'll hear from me, and then I'll go away, and you'll hear from me, and I'll go away. Does that work for the committee?
Now, this is language in the T-bill?
Yes, this is language in the T-bill. So what is posted to the committee's page is draft 4.3 of the T-bill. I expect that an iteration of draft 5.1 or 5.2 will be voted out of committee and introduced this afternoon. This is the version that they went through in detail yesterday. The highlighting in the document is just showing differences from the earlier draft. When Michelle and Jeannie were working on setting up your agenda this week, it seemed like Michelle was picking sections that were not likely to change. And I can say based on their being House Transportation's discussions yesterday, there is a general closeout of all of the language sections that you're going to be seeing today.
Okay, good. That explains it well. Thank you. Mhm.
Okay,
right.
so in draft 4.3, the first section that you are going to be hearing about today, and Senators, if you are in the room, you'll have just the few pages from this 58-page bill on your desks if you want it in paper copy. And I know there'll sort of be some adjustment as we go back to paper or not paper, but you have this language in front of you if you want to look at it in hard copy. I will do a share screen in a moment. I'm just going to get to the right section. So this is section 5, and it is on page 14. Jeannie, thank you for letting me share my screen. So it's 2 subdivisions. This is putting into the T-bill, the governors recommend to use one-time general fund monies in a total amount of $1,050,000 for 2 purposes. The reason why it's in the T-bill and expected to be, if House Appropriations wants it to be, in the budget bill is because this one-time general fund money is flowing through the Agency of Transportation, the Department of Motor Vehicles, to the Vermont Association of Snow Travelers, VAST, in the governor's recommend. House Transportation was supportive of that approach. And the $1,050,000 is split with $50,000 going to support the law enforcement and safety program, and $1 million going to grants to VAST to support the equipment grant and aid program. And I think there are other people that you will be hearing from today who actually know what these 2 programs are. I do not. So $1,050,000 one-time general fund monies as the source was in the governor's recommend. House Transportation has included it in the T-bill, and it remains to be seen what is included in the budget bill that is introduced by House Appropriations. And that's it for me on this one.
Okay, so now we've got to figure out how they're going to spend $1 million. Is that correct? It's strange. It's $1,050,000. That you think the 50,000 would come out of the million. it's separated, I guess. Okay, who would like to explain? Cindy, are you with us this morning?
I am Senator Mazza.
Yeah.
For the record, my name is Cindy Locke. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Snow Travelers, better
You
known
can
as
buy a
VAST.
whole bunch of new machines now. Wow, you got all kinds of money.
Well, this all came about, Senators, from a letter that I drafted to the governor in November regarding looking for some one-time money to help us out. And so I'll describe the two sections and maybe why they're separated. In the letter, which I will send on to Jeannie, I apologize. I did not send this on to you guys before.
Frozen. Cindy, you're frozen to us.
Here to talk about electric snowmobiles. But I will send you, oh, can you guys hear me? Or I'm going to turn my camera off.
You just came back.
Okay, I apologize. I'm turning my camera off. Comcast is having an issue in this area. Otherwise, I would have stayed home if I would have known this was going to be an issue this morning. Can you hear me better now? Okay.
Yes.
So I'll just start over again. In November, I drafted a letter to the governor's office requesting some help with a few different programs that we have. I want to apologize for not having that letter for you. It was just a miscommunication. I really thought I was only here to talk about electric snowmobiles this morning. Don't blame it on Jeannie, please, because it's not her fault. But anyway, so I will, Jeannie, when I finish talking, I'm going to email this to you. So then the senators will have it. But in a nutshell, this letter was a description of VAST, and it pointed out two areas that we could use assistance on. And it includes the $50,000 for law enforcement is to help us expand the program. We've been working very, very hard to expand our program. We have great leadership within Fish and Wildlife. Specifically, they are coordinating our patrols across different agencies now. And they started this 2 years ago. This winter, they actually have a point person that's her main job. And so we went over budget last year because we've been expanding the program, so that the ask was for some of this one-time money to help us if we have any overages in the future. Just so you know, law enforcement is paid for by the registration money and tax dollars, what we get from the gas tax, which is capped. And that money comes to us specifically for law enforcement. So this would help us to grow that program. And then the other is our equipment. And just to let you know that every year we do equipment grants for our clubs. It's called the Equipment Grant and Aid Program. These equipment are grooming machines. We have 100 in our fleet. A brand new one is $250,000. We spend anywhere between 1 million and 2 million a year just grooming our trails, just paying for the fuel, which of course that's going to go up now too. We pay our clubs to groom, and we also offer grants that cover 60% of the total cost of groomers. And every year we have to turn down clubs that need equipment. It's a very, very small list of clubs that we're able to help out. And in that letter, it outlines the last 10 years of requests of how much was requested and how much we were actually able to grant out. And so I left that item open as far as the ask went in the letter. I didn't ask for a specific amount. But in knowing how expensive these machines are, that is $1 million obviously would cover 4 brand new machines. But for this grant and aid program, we also use the monies to fix our older machines. And we have quite a few older machines, some that go back into the late 1990s. So that's in a nutshell what this ask was. The reason that it's coming through, or it's the one-time money, but when speaking with the administration and AOT, it just made sense that it go through the Agency of Transportation. And that's why it's kind of funny with the budget bill and the T-bill.
Cindy, one of the things that I look at this year, when if the $1 million is granted, we call it one-time money. What is that going to set us on a pattern of having to do that on a yearly basis? Because once that money is there, it's pretty hard next year not to have it. And I'm finding that true with a lot of programs, because once you give them the money, and I know you put it to good use, but is that going to make it almost a necessity that you ask for $1 million next year?
Senator, Maza, that is a great question. No, I will not be coming back to you year after year asking for money. This is This is going to supplement the program. Our board of directors have been working on a strategy to implement this money ourselves over a 3 or 5 year plan. And that also doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to come back to you 3 or 5 years from now. We just want the help to sort of boost what we have and able to help the clubs that need the help. And because there has been an increase in recreation because of COVID, and this is one-time money, we thought that this would be able to help us continue to do what we do and serve, you know, the additional people that are on our trails.
But what will happen in the future? Don't you have to have money to, I sense that you're not getting enough to do the repairs and maintain and keep up with it. So if the demand is more, how do you do that in the future? You have to raise rates, or, I mean, is that?
That's exactly that's exactly our plan.
Okay.
We have been, and in fact, well, Quebec is a lot more expensive than us, but Maine and New Hampshire are now starting every year to raise their rates because they're so far behind us and they're realizing what it takes to actually to run their fleets. So they're actually playing catch up now. So we do implement small increases. Like I said, this is a way to supplement what we need. And I do not foresee coming back. We're not going to just go out and buy 4 brand new machines. That's not what we're after. We're asking just for some help to continue to do what we do. And, you know, the machine, since I started at Vast, which was 8 years ago, the most expensive machine was $175,000. It's now $350,000, the most expensive machine. In general, we spend about $250,000 on ours. So we've done really well. We're just looking towards the future and, you know, to help us continue to do what we do.
Just the expenses are going to climb for everybody, every industry, and just the fuel alone is going to, I mean, I just can't imagine every day the fuel prices, and I don't think they're going to come back down too rapidly in the future, but so it's going to be a big expense also. So questions from the committee, go right ahead, jump in. I don't see everybody, but go right ahead. Yes, go right ahead. Go ahead.
My only question for Cindy is, well, one, I still hope we get to hear about the electric snowmobiles, and 2, has the state ever done this before, like other years, 10 years ago? I know you've been around doing this for a long time, so I don't know if this is the first time ever, or this has happened before when there's been some other one-time money.
No, Senator, we have never come and asked for one-time money regarding VAST. The only time that we've come searching for help was about the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, you know, and which we put in $3.5 million of our own money. And so this is just, you know, yes. So no, this is the only time. We don't foresee coming back. And this is very, like, we're taking this incredibly seriously. We're looking at it as really a one-time shot, and just to help us continue to do what we do. And yes, fuel prices are going up, Senator Mazza. And so we're looking at how do we take money from Peter to, you know, feed Paul or whatever, whatever, you know, because we are going to have to pay. Right now, we pay $12 a mile. And we know we're going to have to increase that. You know, we have 5,000 miles of trails. They get groomed 2 to 3 times a week. It is quite expensive.
Senator Mouse, I have a question.
Yeah, go right ahead, Senator Kitchell.
50,000 for law enforcement. That seems like that's an ongoing thing. Obviously, by the time this budget gets passed, this year's season is over. So is this 50,000? Do you envision once you get it, you parcel it out over a period of time? But that seems like that is an ongoing need as opposed to one time. So can you explain your thinking behind the 50,000?
Sure. Sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Senator Kitchell.
No, it's fine. But
yeah,
I can see your equipment is one time. Obviously, at some point, you're going to have to replace it if you're buying a whole lot, but you're talking about staggering it. And so, and of course, this is now moving, the governor is now moving a lot of general fund around, and I'm sitting on a list of budget requests of things that didn't make it on the governor's budget. So what is, how is the 50,000 not really reflective of an ongoing need?
So the 50 would also be spread out over time. It's not just to make up for a one-time deficit. We're just looking at, right now, Fish and Wildlife, they've added a few wardens. Vermont State Police has their auxiliary program. They've lost a couple of auxiliary folks. So it's kind of evened out in that way. But we do, we definitely look at growing our budget about $10,000 a year over the next 5 years. And, whether we search for grants down the road or something else, or look at expanding the percentage that we get out of the gas tax to help us, because right now it's capped, and it has been capped since the beginning. And that helps with law enforcement because they get a dedicated amount, or change that percentage down the road. But we haven't discussed that yet. We are, I'm a planner. I am a definite planner. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is looking to our future, and I'm not a crisis person. So I'm a forecaster and a planner, and so I'm just looking ahead. I'm not looking to come back next year or the year after and ask for the same amount of money. We are, budgets are.
Well, let me ask. Obviously, the Fish and Wildlife, and the state police, they have their own budgets, and we do appropriations. This is going from AOT to VAST, and you will use it to pay deputy sheriffs. I'm just wondering what law enforcement and safety activities, who will be providing the services that would be envisioned here in this grant.
So we actually do pay Fish and Wildlife, and we do pay Vermont State Police. They are allotted a certain amount. For instance, Fish and Wildlife are out anyway. They have snowmobiles. So
Right.
They are out checking, ice fishermen and the other duties that they have. They supplement their program when they're doing safety checks on our trail system, or accident response. And the same with, and then with state police, they specifically have snowmobiles for VAST. These machines we buy, we offer a grant and aid program to them to help them buy their snowmobiles and their trailers. And then again, and we do that with Fish and Wildlife, and we do that with the sheriffs. And then we have one police department, which is the Morristown Police Department. That's part of our program. So all of them are paid through VAST.
And then we have that freestanding grant for down in the southern part of the state for trail enforcement.
That's correct. That's the Southern Vermont Mountain Rescue Team. They just changed the name. So, but yes, that's $35,000 a year. That's directly paid from the legislature for this team that covers Bennington and Windham County. And that is, they are also part of our group, but we do not pay them, but they coordinate with us, and they have their local police department, sheriffs, Fish and Wildlife, and state police. But I do think that I did hear at the governor's council meeting the other day, I think state police is stepping away from that program and their partnership with them. I'm not sure why. It seemed it wasn't anything bad. It just was something that they were working on. So there might be more cost for us in Southern Vermont with state police down the road.
Other questions?
No, I'm done.
May I ask one, Senator Mazza?
Go ahead. You're ready. Yeah.
Cindy, I'm sorry, I'm not more familiar with VAST and everything they do, and I definitely am supportive. We need to support our outdoor recreation activities in Vermont. My question is, I have been asked by constituents, and I agree with them, that I need to look at everything through a climate crisis lens. I'm curious if this $1 million can be framed or at all incentivized to focus on supporting, which I think you're about to talk about, electric snowmobiles. Like, do you have the infrastructure in place at your different touch points where people launch their snowmobiles, that there's charging infrastructure there, or is there any way that this money could be assured to be focused on working on greener sources for this recreational activity?
Sure. No, that's a very good question. So this money really, while we can and might use some of it for electric snowmobiles, there also are electric groomers out there right now that are actually more developed than the snowmobiles. So these are the larger, Piston Bully is one of the companies that has developed. Those are the big red ones that you see at the ski areas, like if you ski Stowe or something like that, they're the big Piston Bullies. And they do have an electric, and they have an electric hybrid as well, that we're interested in looking at. Maine has one or two of them right now out on their system. So this money really is to support the clubs that are all volunteers. These are thousands of volunteers that tinker on these machines, work on them, drive them all on their own time, except for the $12 a mile. So that's where we really are focusing the 1 million on. As far as the snowmobiles go, and whether some of that was for an electric, part of it you wanted to dedicate to purchasing one electric groomer to try out in an area, absolutely. I would, that would be very acceptable to us. We're not coming to you saying we want this money and we don't ever plan to report back to you what we do or have you not have any say in what happens. But that would be that's a more developed technology than the snowmobile. So I learned a lot. We had, Senator Mazza, is it okay if I talk about electric snowmobiles?
Go right ahead.
Okay. We had a 5-day event with Taiga. They're from Canada, and they have 3 different models of electric snowmobiles. These guys come from the electric car industry. They were headed out to Tahoe before we got a hold of them, and then they ended up coming here once they realized what Vermont has and how green we are focused. And it was a great event. AOT helped out, the administration helped out, FPR, Fish and Wildlife, we were all there. But anyway, so this technology is new, and their main focus right now is more on ski areas and possibly tours, because there are some things that we lack here, which is the charging station infrastructure. I know the governor has that outlined for highways, for cars, and we can use the same charging station. So let's take Senator Kitchell's brother, Marty, as an example. So he's in Danville, he's got some charging stations there that can be used by snowmobilers. But these machines only go around 60 miles, 50 to 60 miles before they need to be fully charged again. So if, north of Danville, Island Pond, which is one of our busiest snowmobile areas, there are no EV chargers up there. So there's going to be some work. AOT is working on this with Taiga. We're looking at federal grants to help expand that program, but it's probably going to be a few years before these machines are ready, really ready for consumers. And they've gotten all the bugs worked out. And we've got the charging infrastructure. So with ski areas, because they can easily have a charging network there, machines will be great for there, as well as maybe some of the tour operators that will go out just for a few hours and then go back. We're also looking at putting one here at the VAST office.
How far does a gasoline engine snowmobile go in comparison, roughly?
150 miles.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is. And it was interesting too, because Senator Mazza, this company, they're not snowmobilers. They came from the electric car industry. So there was a lot of aesthetics that snowmobilers would like, but then also that they hadn't figured out yet. Just like simple things like the windshield wasn't solid enough. There's no padding on the seat, like things that, snowmobilers want to have. And I know that they'll figure this out. And then there are manufacturers that are in existence like Polaris and Skidoo that are working already also on electric snowmobiles. And they get what snowmobilers like, to ride on and for safety and for comfortableness. And yeah.
And I suppose they have to have a fast charge also. They don't want to sit there for 2 hours.
Yeah. A fast charge, because you generally, when you stop for lunch, you're there for an hour. One of my board members thinks it would be really great if it could be, how you take those propane cylinders
Yeah.
You know, and you go turn one in and you get a new one. Wouldn't it be great if you could pull into Marty's and there's a battery chain, you know, you could take your
Right.
battery, put it in the little, you know, gated area and take a new battery out. And maybe that's where we move down the road. These machines are exciting to ride. Like, we are very excited about it. But it's probably really going to be another couple of years before they're fully developed. They are taking orders at Taiga right now and getting people lined up to buy them.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I have a
Go right ahead.
question. So Cindy, do you know, well, I guess, so right now they're taking orders at Polaris and others like that, or they just all have demo models. They're not, there's no other company that's just selling them at this point?
I'm not aware of them selling them at this point. I think Polaris has developed an ATV or is just about to, that's electric. I know that VASA is on a waiting list for a grant or they got a grant and they're on a waiting list for an ATV. I don't believe the snowmobiles are yet ready. But I do believe that the governor's incentive program, that's not just for 1 year, is from what I read. So there is that incentive program too, that's also in the T-bill, giving people who make 80% the ability to get grants to buy electric snowmobiles. Right now, Taiga is taking a $500 deposit and that's refundable. Until the machine is actually made, they're making them specifically for each person that orders one. And I don't know what their timeline is.
And so, yeah, we didn't know about the incentive program. So it's a T-bill yet, but so that's Alice has put that in the T-bill?
Yeah, hold on. It's right now, from what I got from Frank Stanley, you guys know Frank, it was Section 3 vehicle incentive programs. Incentive program for new PEVs. The agency is authorized to spend up to $12 million as appropriated in fiscal year 2023 budget on the incentive program for new PEVs established in 2019 acts and resolves. It says e-recreation incentive program. The agency is authorized to spend $2 million as appropriated in the fiscal year 2023 budget on an e-recreation incentive program, with up to 1 million of that 2 million available for incentives for the purchase of electric bicycles. And then it as defined by just the number, and with up to 1 million of that 2 million available for incentives for the purchase of all-terrain vehicles and snowmobiles that do not contain an internal combustion engine as manufactured and sold. Incentives shall be 16 available to all Vermonters who self-certify as to having an income at 80% of the state median income.
Okay, that's interesting. And so since the snowmobiles aren't for sale, we don't know what charging system they're using, what kind of adapter. I'm assuming they would use the common.
Yes. Yeah, they're using the same ones that the cars use. So they're actually developing some with Tesla, and they're using, I mean, they're developing their own, but they're using Teslas. And so it's the same long charge, quick charge that you would see at any business that has one. Yeah.
Well, there are two different kinds. Like the Japanese make a different one. So like the Nissan Leafs and the Honda hybrids have a different cord than the other ones, but I'm assuming the snowmobile ones would use the ones that the American car manufacturers are using.
Yes.
What is the policy basis for funding recreational vehicles when we already?
We're promoting fun.
Tourism.
I'm serious, because obviously our goal in terms of EVs that are used year round to get to work, et cetera, that are there to support required activities. I'm just wondering if we had lots of money and we weren't having to make tough decisions around how we're allocating it, I might have a different response. But so what can at least help me understand what is the policy basis for using public funding for this purpose? It's because we don't want to disadvantage this group of Vermonters from, I guess, yeah, from recreational, but why don't we buy ski passes? I don't know. I'm just, I'm just thinking about, you know, what is the thinking behind it?
Senator Mazza.
Yes, go right ahead.
Senator Kitchell, I think that question might be asked if you were to ask your brother about what type of business that brings to a local area store and what it does for the gas tax and all of that. I mean, you know, we put these systems in ultimately to derive money from them at some point in time. Not only is it fun and being outdoors and all of that, but you know, these trails are always geared towards being so they can get dumped off somewhere so they can support the local economies. I know when I had a restaurant and a mini mart, one good weekend of snowmobiling would carry me for the month. And
yeah, I'm just thinking about how we're using to support, if the goal is to reduce carbon emissions and help people whose incomes are limited so that they can't get a car that they use 12 months of the year, how we would take $1 million and use it in this particular way. That's, I understand the economic benefit. On the other hand, there is an economic benefit, but there's also an economic benefit for that person to get to the store and, you know, using a vehicle. So I'm just, you know, we kind of struggled with the e-bike last year. And I don't know, maybe people are using snowmobiles to get to work or to shop, but I don't think so. So I'm just trying to understand what would be the policy thinking behind expanding in this environment where there's as much money as there is, we still are having limits to spend $1 million in this particular way. And I don't know who can answer that, probably AOT, because it's part of the governor's proposed.
Go ahead, Senator Chittenden.
So real quick, your line of thinking here is connects to my question, and I'm wondering if to align with our policy objectives, if we want to make this language more targeted to electrify snowmobiles, the infrastructure or grooming that is environmentally sound. So putting some strings, if you want to call them, I'd be supportive of that, because that would align these funds for our environmental objectives.
And then you'd have some legacy because you're building infrastructure. Well, anyway, that's the question.
Senator Mazza.
Go ahead. Yep.
Anthea has her hand up. She might be able to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go right ahead, Anthea. Go right ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. The only thing I wanted to add to the conversation is that the language that Cindy was reading from was from an earlier version of the T-bill. And I think there is still a lot up in the air about the governor's recommend, which was to use the state and local fiscal recovery funds, the ARPA money, for most of the charging stations infrastructure and also for the vehicle incentive programs, many of which is providing an additional influx of money for existing programs. And then there was this in the governor's recommend, $2 million for e-recreation. That has been split out in the version of the T-bill that the House is working with now. Obviously, House Appropriations has not, you know, seen it or taken it up yet, but it is splitting it out. It's 1 million for electric bicycles, 1 million for electric ATVs and e-snowmobiles. And the point I just want to mention here is that 80% state median income cap is no longer in the language that House Transportation is looking at. And the link to ARPA, if there is one, would be travel, tourism, and hospitality as that presumptively impacted industry. So I don't know what's going to be coming over to your body. I think part of the reason why Michelle didn't suggest taking up sections, what were originally 2 and 3, and now are going to be 2 and 5, I believe, in the version that comes over, having to do with the infrastructure grants and the vehicle incentives, including e-snowmobiles, was because I don't think that is something that House Transportation has finished, and House Appropriations certainly hasn't finished with it.
All right, and the only reason I'm responding the way I am is I already know we're oversubscribed in ARPA by about 60 million over what the governor's proposed. So there's this idea that there's just millions and millions of dollars out there to be grabbed is coming down to the fiscal reality of the fact that we've got a lot more proposed requests for its use, and so and the same is true for general fund. So that's why I'm asking the questions that I am, because ultimately we've got more proposed spending than we've got money to spend, to put it simply.
Okay, all right.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure,
So
go ahead.
I understand what you're saying in this, these trail organizations run on shoestring budgets. I mean, granted, we have a very large budget, but we have a lot of money that we have to spend. And so the funds to help us to continue to do what we do, talking about the 1,050,000 is very, very important to us, because of the clubs, because of the volunteers, because of what's, just like Senator Ingalls mentioned, the businesses. So that money is very important to us. Tourism has gone up, expenses have gone up. And then on the other side of that, looking at the future of the electric, whether it's a snowmobile or a groomer, we're excited about it. It's brand new. We don't have the infrastructure to support it yet. Maybe a groomer we would, but not in every area, because they have to be able to plug in. And they also have to make sure that they're reliable. Our guys are out there when it's 40 below zero and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're miles and miles away from any sort of safety if something breaks down. So there's a lot of, taking baby steps at this point. It's not completely there yet. That's all I want to say.
Okay,
I just know the economic, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Senator
go ahead.
Moss.
Go
I
ahead.
just know the economics of when folks come and use these trails, just like the mountain bikers, just like they're on vacation. They're on vacation, and either they can come here and be supported, or they can go to New Hampshire or Maine or elsewhere and be supported. And for what it does for the economies of, and I hear Senator Kitchell, I really, really do, and I'm with her. I do understand. I hear it all the time that we just have all this pot of money, and it's over prescribed. But I just don't want to lose sight of an economic driver of local economy if we can do an investment. I don't know if it's the $1 million here or $1 million there or what's going on, but before we say no because it's $1 million, maybe we can prioritize and figure out really what's best to keep our local economies going, especially coming off of the year that we just had.
Well, let me be clear. I'm not in any way diminishing the importance that snow machines actually, their market, the way they're purchasing, et cetera, is very different than the cyclist, to be truthful. They spend a lot more money in many ways. And so my questioning was more around providing a subsidy for someone to go out and purchase a snowmobile as opposed to funding or an ATV. Now, maybe some do need it. Maybe they need it because of I don't know, because of sugaring or whatever, and they meet the income test. But so my concern is around the subsidy to a Vermont household for say over EV vehicle or a plug-in hybrid to get them to work, et cetera, as opposed to how many grants you can give for people to go out and purchase one of these machines and subsidize the purchase. It's a matter of prioritizing sort of the basic needs of the household. So I'm not concerned so much about the $1 million here and investing in the groomer and the infrastructure. I'm really talking about what we subsidize, who we subsidize, and and for what reason? That's really what my questioning is targeted at.
Someone has to convince me that we should subsidize electric bicycles. I don't know why. They don't replace gasoline engine bicycles. And someone has to convince me why we're subsidizing or rebate on electric bicycles. That's beyond I can understand why we're doing that. I can see cars, people drive back and forth to work, but that's still up in the air for me. But anyway, Cindy, thank God the club has got you. You've done a great job over the years, and they better hang on to you for a while.
Thank you, Senator. I want to apologize to the committee and thank Athea for bringing that up, that it is still in House Transportation. And I jumped the gun on you guys. I didn't mean to come in here and muddy the waters. We just got involved in the electric snowmobiles. And anyway, I just appreciate your time.
We're looking for waters to be muddied until that bill comes over.
Yeah, right. And just remember, I have a 1976 Polaris that's the highest bidder. You know, I still got it. Yes, go ahead. Someone else?
No. We did have Costa on the agenda. I didn't know.
Oh yeah, Costa. Anything you want to add to this conversation? We buffed you out so far.
Thank you, Senator Mazza. For the record, Costa Pappas with the Agency of Transportation. I do not have anything to add at this point.
Do you have a snow machine?
I do not.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, unless there's any, we'll certainly have more discussion of this issue, I'm sure, but I guess we got to move on this morning. Thank you very much, Cindy and Costas. I think, Anthea, nothing else to add at this time?
Nope, but I think you're going to cycle back to me.
Okay, yes, you're next on the list. Go right ahead.
Okay, back again. So we are now going to be talking about Section 18 in the version of the T-bill that House Transportation was working on yesterday. I don't think there is an expectation that this language is going to change. I am going to do just the barest of walkthroughs because I looked ahead on your agenda, and I know you've got a slide deck coming up with way more information about the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program than I'm going to be able to provide. But before you look at this language, the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program is funded entirely with federal money and the local match. There are not transportation fund dollars that goes to it. The eligibility is dictated by federal law, and in the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the amount of money that is going to be available under the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program has increased. So what Section 18 is going to do in this form is it's cleaning up some of the outdated language. You'll see in subdivision F1 at the bottom of page 26, it's talking about what was going to happen in fiscal years 2018 and 2019. And then in the next subdivision in fiscal years 2020 and 2021, deleting that language, not applicable anymore. And then starting in fiscal year 2024, instead of having there be a $1,100,000 as the sort of presumptive amount that is going to go to municipalities for environmental mitigation projects, instead it would be 50% of the total amount that's available in grant program funds, unless there is less interest from the applications for those environmental mitigation projects, in which case it would be lower. And then the balance, and this language is on lines 8 to 10 of page 27, the balance would go to any eligibility activity in accordance with the priority, that's the prioritization that's established in what was subdivision 4, but would now be subdivision 2. So shifting away from this presumptive minimum of $1,100,000 and then having it be a percentage of the total funds available. And the expectation is that that will almost always be above $1,100,000 based on how much is expected to come to Vermont, unless of course the interest from the municipalities that are applying is less than that. And with that, as sort of your understanding of what the language would do, I think you probably want to hear from the agency on the program in general and the historic.
Yeah, I want to know in accordance with the priorities established in subdivision 2. I'm looking, I don't.
Just scroll down a little bit, starting at line 11, you'll see the subdivision 4 is struck out and it's now going to be subdivision 2. And it's giving preferential weighting to projects involving as a primary feature, a bicycle or pedestrian facility.
That's it? That's our priority?
I'm seeing a nod from Scott Robertson.
I can start whenever you're ready. Just give me the signal.
It says in accordance with the priorities established.
And that is the balance of the language.
And so our priorities are only one.
Bicycle pedestrian.
Oh, keep in mind,
Bike ped.
So there also is that you need to remember that there is all of the federal eligibility criteria that's there. So this is just the priority that Vermont has put in place, sort of as a narrowing of federal eligibility. And you get the link to federal eligibility up in the beginning of the language. And that is awards shall be made eligible to entities as defined under 23 USC section 133H and limiting in activities that are authorized under federal law. And I believe there's been an expanding of what activities are authorized in the IIJA.
Okay, shall be awarded in accordance with the priorities. They shall be awarded. So what we're saying is 50% shall be awarded to, but then we say shall give preferential weighting to projects involving as a primary feature. So I'm having a hard time reconciling the language on 10 with the language in line 14, 15, and 16 in that section. That's what I'm struggling with, the language.
Okay, so the thing I would point out there is this is current law. It is moving what is currently on lines 1, 2, and 3 at the top of page 27 that's being struck out. And it's saying that it should be done in accordance with the priorities established in subdivision 4, what will now become subdivision 2. So I think to the extent that your question is about what really is existing law, it might be helpful to hear from the agency in terms of how they are interpreting that. The other thing I would point out in the language, and this is existing statute, is that the degree of preferential weighting and the determination is at the complete discretion of the agency. So there is a lot of discretion that then is being given to the agency in both interpreting this language and in how it actually is going forward in the evaluation of what the weighting should be when it comes to that limited amount of preferential criteria that's in statute. And I can look into the history of how this language sort of came to be, but since it's not a change from existing statute, I didn't dive into the legislative history there, but I certainly can if it's something you're interested in.
I guess maybe nobody else is struggling with what it says on line 9, shall be awarded for any, shall be awarded with the priorities, which means that 50%, we said, what shall be awarded in accordance with the priorities of subdivision 2. And then subdivision 2 now, which is existing language, I guess, shall, I guess, in accordance with the priorities established. And I only see, I don't see priorities being, priorities are preferential weighting to projects involving bike or ped. So one is using the term priority and the other is using preferential weighting. And so shall be awarded. So anyway, I don't know, forget it. I'm just having a hard time with priorities and weighting.
Okay, I think I understand a little bit more now. And I would say, if you look at it, the shall be awarded would apply to the any eligible activity. So think of that as one discrete piece. And then for the next part, it needs to be in accordance with the priorities. And to the extent that you're seeing a disconnect between you're saying priorities, yet then in the other language, it's preferential, I think that is meant to trying to sort of think about how the sections fit together, say that it is a priority to give preferential weighting to this limited subset of projects that have as a primary feature a bicycle or pedestrian feature. I see where you're having a disconnect there with using priority and preferential treatment. And I think we certainly could craft a modification of that language that maybe has some more clarity and consistency in the phrasing. But for purposes of the language that you have here with House Transportation's intent with the language to only be changing that 1.1 million minimum, none of the other language was modified. But you're going to get the bill and you can modify it all you want.
Well, but they're also talking about, and the balance shall be. So, they're adding the language on 9 and 10 as well as 50. I don't have any problem with 50% rather than getting a specific figure, but it's just the additional language shall be awarded.
Yeah, that language is actually moving down from what's struck out on lines 1 to 3. It's just rearranging the structure of the section a little bit, but that is existing language. It's existing phrasing that is in the statute now.
Well, that's the whole thing. When you go back and look at something, then it raises questions even though it's in place. So all they want to do is get rid of the exact dollar figure and say 50%, which is pretty straightforward. So I wish I hadn't looked at it. Now I'm using too much gray cells and I don't have very many left. All right.
Okay. Who would, Scott, are you on? Who's next with us this morning? I know you've been chomping at the bit.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Senator Mazza. Yeah, my name's Scott Robertson. I'm an engineer for VTrans, project manager, as well as the coordinator for the Transportation Alternative Program grant solicitation. So, and I put together a presentation to go over the basic highlights of this. And I believe Joel Perigo, the manager of municipal assistance, is also on here with us.
Yeah, okay.
So here I go. I'm going to share my screen real quick. And hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
So the Transportation Alternative Program, like was already said, we budget about $2.2 million a year for solicitation, and that's all federal funding. We have a $300,000 cap per grant with an 80% federal, 20% local funding split. And there is a preferential weighting applied to bike and pedestrian facilities when applicable. I threw that when applicable in there because if we do set aside, environmental mitigation funding, the preference those preferences don't apply to those funds. Oh, sorry about that. So eligible applicants, we have a lot of eligible applicants here of agencies, but basically 99% of applicants are towns. We can't even count on one hand applicants that aren't towns. So basically towns apply for this funding, even though it is possible for a few other agencies to apply. Eligible projects. We have 7 types of eligible projects, and this is a bit wordy. Basically, category A and B here, for a long time, they were the meat of the whole thing. That is the bike and pedestrian, sidewalks, shared use paths, ADA compliant ramps, and associated items like safety lighting, things like that, line striping. That all applies here in categories A and B. Category C is conversion of abandoned railroad corridors for trails for bikes and pedestrians. Category D is for turnouts, overlooks, and viewing areas, which we have not seen one application for that yet. Category E, community improvement activities, includes historic preservation, things like covered bridges or train stations. We've had a few applications for that. Vegetation management practices in a very utilitarian sense, not a beautification sense, is an eligible application, and archaeological activities relating to transportation are also eligible. And now here we are with category F, which is our new focus with the set-asides, environmental mitigation activities. And subcategory I is basically the stormwater management control category for a lot of types of projects. And I have a slide with some examples coming up here. This is also where salt sheds kind of fits into the program. And then we also have subcategory F2, which is wildlife mortality mitigation projects. And category G is a bit redundant. It's the old Safe Routes to School program that is incorporated into this program. So a little bit about salt sheds, because I know that comes up a bit. FHWA has allowed us the flexibility to actually incorporate these salt sheds with these funds. So they're eligible under the environmental mitigation category. We consider them on a case-by-case basis. They're kind of tough to score because, with respect to water quality improvement, because comparing, the scoring committee comparing elements, it's a bit challenging, but we do in. Here's our incorporated language. Basically, any environmental mitigation activity, including pollution prevention and pollution abatement activities to address stormwater management and control related to highway construction runoff. So basically, we do get an awful lot of salt shed applications now. It's especially when there's a set aside. I get those calls all the time. Is this the year where we've got a set aside for stormwater? Because if not, some municipalities will wait until we do before they apply. Right now, VTrans, and I'm mainly coordinating this, is a policy document which will help define and clarify the parameters regarding the scope, cost, eligibility, and scoring for future salt shed applications, just to clear things up, because the applications seem to be expanding into perhaps more than the original intent was. But so we're still working on fine tuning that. Here's an example of a bunch of environmental mitigation projects, anywhere from planning studies for phosphorus control or stormwater inventories to gravel wetlands, permeable pavers, check dams, detention ponds, which are very common. Gravel wetlands are very popular and for the dollar provide the best bang for the buck for actually clean water. So here's some examples of things that might be eligible in the TAP program. So a bit of history, just so you guys are aware. TAP started in 2013. Before that, it was the Transportation Enhancement Program. And all categories applied up until 2016, where we started this set aside for 50%. Actually, it was stated as 1.1 million set aside for stormwater. And that was in effect for 2 years. Then in 2018 and 19, it was 100% stormwater quality improvement projects. Then in 2020 up until 2021, it was all categories again. And here we are back into 50% for state fiscal year 2022, as it was solicited that way. And here's just a quick little chart that I put together on some history of demand versus awarded. We always try to stick very close to 2.2 million in the awarded category, but back in 2018, this goes back 5 years, the demand, we received $5.7 million in applications. And I believe the pandemic years, once we get down to 2020, it kind of dropped a bit. And I believe the pandemic might have something to do with that. But we normally get between $4 to $6 million of applications. That boils down to about 30 applications. We normally award about 8 of those to utilize the 2.2 million. And this is just a quick summary of what the last 5 years look like. So real quick overview, that's it. I believe that's my last slide. It is. And I can keep sharing any one of these slides if you'd like, or answer questions.
Any questions from the committee at this time?
I have a question, Senator.
Go right ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you. I'm going to go back to Senator Kitchell's line of questioning about the prioritization or preferential weighting to bicycle and pedestrian facilities. As I see the actual breakout here, it almost seems like we are spending more money on non-environmental focuses over the years past, like disproportionately. I'm trying to understand why we wouldn't want to, as a state, motivate the municipalities with preferential treatment to focus on the environmental item F of your eligible products, environmental mitigation activities, and then also the safe routes to school program. It almost seems like the focus on bicycle and pedestrian growth facilities is neglecting the infrastructure we have and the safety and the environmental concerns. Where does this language come from, the preferential weighting for bicycle and pedestrians? What's the motivation for that in your mind, if you might speak to that?
Well, if you read back just in history, it's federally driven and historically driven that's what the original intent was, maybe not the intent, but the likelihood of an application was much higher for something like a sidewalk or a shared use path. That's just where it all seemed to focus on the most. Until we had these set asides, the environmental mitigation projects were a small percentage of our application. So maybe it could just be what was being applied for at the time. And that the history goes back into the TE program, which goes back, to the 90s. That's just how it precipitated. So I'm not sure where it all started, but that's until we started setting this aside, it was mostly bike and ped related projects. Now, Joel, maybe you've got some more to add to that.
Yeah, I can a little bit. Excuse my voice a little bit. For the record, I'm Joel Parago, the Municipal Assistance Program Manager. I think, and this predates me a little bit too, the intent here was that back when the Clean Water Bill passed, there was an opportunity to put some more funding into our obligations as part of the Clean Water Bill. And so one way to capture that was to sort of enhance this environmental mitigation category by putting this set aside out. And then in the years, I don't know if Scott's got it up there still. Yeah, I mean, 2018 and 2019, all of that funding was put out for environmental mitigation only. And that was to basically show that we were putting that money into clean water investments. But historically speaking, both the transportation enhancements and transportation alternatives prior to the Clean Water Bill, as Scott said, 95% of our applications were always in that bike ped type facility. It's sort of like always been the to-go place for municipalities when they want to build a sidewalk and that sort of thing. So hopefully that clarifies and answers your question.
Just as a quick follow-up, I would just wonder why we wouldn't want to, through a policy lens, focus or at least encourage or make equal weighting the environmental potential projects, since that's such an important topic these days.
Well, keep in mind too, though, that so with this set aside, the environmental, and it, like Scott started to get into, comparing an environmental mitigation project to a bike ped project is difficult to do. And so with this set aside, they're on off to the side here. They get that half of the appropriation, and now the remaining categories, the bike ped projects, as well as all those other projects that Scott went through, the different categories, get the other 50%, with the bike peds being preferentially weighted on that side. Is
Sure.
that okay?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? I guess not. Okay. All right. Nobody else has anything? The agency has anything else to offer? Anybody? Anthea, anything to offer? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Mazza,
Yes.
because we went a little over on the prior segment, I wonder if you might want to consider not taking the break, because one of the witnesses on the next segment has to leave by 11:15.
Okay.
And she's not here yet either. I just
Well,
thought-
why don't we just take a 5-minute break?
Okay,
Can we do that? 5 minutes?
Great, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
I asked too many